Hello, everyone. I am Ben Johnson, and this is the Perpetual Chess Podcast. Perpetual Chess is a weekly interview show where top chess players, authors, content creators, and accomplished amateurs discuss their careers and share stories and chess improvement tips. Perpetual Chess is a part of the Blue Wire Podcast Network, and we'd like to give special thanks to our presenting chess education sponsor, Chessable.com. For more information about the show, you can go to perpetualchesspod.com. But without further ado, let's get to the show. Hello, everyone, and welcome back to Perpetual Chess. We are joined for part 2 of a series which began 2 years ago. Sometimes listeners or in interviews, people ask me what my favorite episode of Perpetual Chess is. And for a while, I was coy, or maybe I would list like 7 different episodes, which could be true, but recently in an interview, I copped to the fact that my favorite episode of all is number 177 with our guest today, where he took us behind the scenes as the lead trainer for Grandmaster Anand's prep team. And in that particular podcast from May of 2020, he discussed the decisive game of the 2010 World Championship. What we're going to discuss today is the match that took place 2 years later. Our guest, Grandmaster Peter Heine Nielsen, will be taking us through the entire World Championship match of Anand versus Gelfand in Moscow, 2012. Again, it recently celebrated its 10-year birthday, so Grandmaster Peter Heine Nielsen was feeling nostalgic and graciously offered to come on the podcast to discuss it. A bit more information about our guest, even though I suspect a lot of you know of him. He is 5-time champion of Denmark. He's been ranked comfortably in the top 50 players in the world, peak rating of 2,700. But these days, he's a full-time trainer and world-class opening theoretician. He was the head of Grandmaster Viswanathan Anand's World Championship team, and now is the head of Grandmaster Magnus Carlsen's training team. He's also a chess podcaster. You can hear him every week on the Chicken Chess Club podcast with Grandmaster Jan Gustafsson and Laurent Fressinet as they riff on and discuss chess news. I tune in right when it comes out, basically every Wednesday. He is running for FIDE Vice President with Grandmaster Andrzej Barash-Politz. And we are recording here on July 6, 2022. And no, he will not be telling us if Grandmaster Magnus Carlsen will be defending his title. So without further ado, let's welcome back Grandmaster Peter Heine Nielsen. Peter, welcome back.
Thanks a lot, and thanks for the kind but long introduction.
Yes, a lot to cover just to give context for listeners, but I'm so excited for this. I love hearing this chess history, and you're in such a unique position to share so many insights that other people can only speculate about or get secondhand. Now, before we get to your recollections, Peter, my first question was just generally about the sort of concept of memory and episodic memory in particular, meaning you're not recalling actual like opening lines or facts, but you're recalling events that happened in your life, and different people have different ability to do that. So how good is your episodic memory, Peter?
I think generally it's very good. I think actually it's very good. But of course, towards chess contents and these matches, I would sometimes have to recheck it, for instance, and go to the history files of ChessBase to see which day were we debating such and such. But I mean, at least my own understanding of it is that I have a strong memory. But I think that goes for all chess players, or all very strong chess players. I think Kasparov debated it in some very old video that memory is a very essential part of strong chess players, simply because, well, maybe not memory in a general sense, but memory in a kind of weird sense where we will, I mean, let's say, remember themes and be able to sort of use them properly and such. I tend to be able to remember that, this opening idea, this diagram in a chess book would be placed at a certain place or something like that. I remember when I was a kid, there was a lecture by Bent Larsen at the chess school I was at, and he said that, go and get me this informant. I don't remember the number, but it was pink or something like that. So you will remember things by weird details, and they tend out to be surprisingly often right. But I might easily misremember what I was doing yesterday, for instance. So it's Anyway.
Well, any misremembered details will add to the mythology. But I did review Mindmaster by Viswanathan Anand and the Anand files, which I also enjoyed. So I was not there, was far from there, but hopefully can help jog your memory in a few key moments. And one other question regarding memory, Peter, is something like the 2012 World Championship match and all the World Championship matches that you've been a part of. Of course, Anand describes them as a bit of a blur because you're often, the trainers in particular, are often sort of in a room just in front of computers the whole time. But do you feel like you have heightened memory of those moments as opposed to sort of like a sort of more mundane day at home?
Absolutely. It's well, to call them life-defining moments is too strong, but it's career-defining moments, and it's typically moments under incredible stress, and it's also typically things that you are either very proud of or somewhat embarrassed of, depending on the quality of your work and such. So I think there's a lot of details that you remember extremely well in that way. But well, let's see. It might turn out embarrassingly because opposite to you, well, I also wanted to prepare a bit, but I couldn't find the books that you mentioned and such. So I will do it by memory, but I hope that that sort of my memory will be good. Else I will have to do the Timman defense. I think at some point in New Chess, Timman told a beautiful anecdote, and a reader wrote in and said that, well, you know, there were some factual errors in that, and Timman replied back, yes, but I still think my story was better. So well,
right, yeah.
We'll see.
Well, they say in like the science of memory, with episodic memory in particular, you should think of it not as like a save function, like as an event happens and then you remember it, but as like a save as function. Mm-hmm. So an event happens, but then every time you call it up in your memory, you run the risk of changing it. Mm-hmm. So there could have been some of that at work, but definitely, Peter, in our prior conversation, I was extremely impressed with your recall of those critical events leading up to the decisive game in 2010. So I'm not too worried personally.
I understand, but also, I mean, the nice thing with chess things is that in ChessBase, there is this function that called history folders, which saves the games you are looking at just as a backup. So basically, for all these matches, you can go in and you can see that you looked at all these things and such. For instance, I think when one of the books were out, I was sort of puzzled because some of the statements was contradicting my memory. So I went into the history folder and at least that exact one I checked confirmed what I remembered and such. So this is actually the interesting thing with these more modern World Championship matches, that there is a lot of historical material if you have access to the files. You can actually do like a real historian and go into the archives and see that, okay, on that day we were looking at 200 files or something like that in this order. So, I mean, there is room for some chess psychology in that sense.
Okay, well, without further prelude, let's get to it. So let's get to, correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe the match was starting in May of 2012, and you guys convened in Bonn, not in Bonn, in Germany, elsewhere in Germany, where Viswanathan Anand lived. Correct.
We were in Bad Soden in Germany, which is a small, spa town. Well, Bad is referring to that in the German language. In Bad Soden, where Anand has a flat, and we were basically 4 seconds. Me, Rustam Kasimzdhanov, Surya Ganguly, and Wotjasek. And we met on the 15th of January, or actually maybe the others came a couple of days earlier because I was playing the Danish league. It's always tricky arriving later than the others because then the opening choices might be made before you showed up. So that mistake I will try not to make again. But the general point I want to get to is that we started on the 15th of January, and I think we ended on the 15th of April. And I only had a small break of visiting my girlfriend in Lithuania for like 3-4 days, and then I played Bundesliga. Else, I stayed in Bad Soden for 3 months and just worked on chess nonstop.
Wow.
Yeah, that was completely insane. But that's how we did it. Yeah.
Yeah, it sounds intense. And a quick quote from Grandmaster Anand in Mindmaster, he writes, "It was our third match for the World Championships, and months of being locked up together had turned us into a jaded, vapid unit. Unlike in Bonn in 2008, when our work was fresh and brimming with novelty, this match felt like an obligation, a burden we wanted to offload." Does that ring true?
Yeah, I probably have a bit of a different flavor to it, but the conclusion is more or less the same, I would say. I think none of us thought it was particularly a good idea to do it like 3 months in a row, but probably some what you call it, logistics with planning made it difficult to do otherwise. There could be, a couple of tournaments, there might be Christmas and stuff like this. Somehow it was the only way to do it. And we had this tendency to prepare a lot. And 3 months sounds indeed like an awful lot, but maybe Nepomniachtchi was doing the same for the previous match. It's just Magnus who does it differently. So somehow we've gotten used to this idea that you can prepare less, perhaps. But for us, probably 3 months total was normal. It was just that we did it in one go. And of course, I think also, this 3 month thing contributed a lot to that the team split up afterwards. I mean, this was a tough experience. I basically remember it like three phases for myself. That the first month was rather good. Of course, there was opening problems. I remember specifically 1 week where we had to find ideas against the Queen's Gambit declined. It was completely hopeless. No one could come up with anything. And it was basically, you work from morning to evening. Nothing happens. No ideas materializes and such. It was generally pretty depressive. But the first month I still thought was rather good. And I think one indicator of that was that for myself, I came there in not too great physical shape, but I was running each morning before breakfast. And I think around after a month, I was running 10 kilometers in the morning before breakfast. This is quite an achievement for me, and I felt in great shape. But then for the second month, it started collapsing. I think it was too long, it was too dark. Also, you can hear it's January, February, it's winter months and such. So I think basically my shape managed to peak and then fall back again. I recall that I would end up, when we finished work in the evening, I would go to the, sort of candy machine, buy chips, buy chocolate, and sit and eat and watch series and do no sports, whatever. And basically fall into almost some kind of depressed state. And then in the third month, things would kind of improve again. But, there's no doubt that this was psychologically extremely tough. I've forgotten if this was the camp that Jonathan Browsand met us, or maybe it was the previous one. But the point stays was that I think in the first matches, let's say on a free day, we would just hang out together and do some positive things. While now, I think on a free day, we just didn't want to see anybody and such. And I think a lot of it is connected to that we basically had an incredibly tough work routine. There was a lot of discipline, and I think if you read some of the books, it might to some extent be me who has implemented that. But that, we will meet after breakfast, and basically we will work on chess till after midnight. Of course, with breaks for eating, for going for walks, for doing some sports, but basically non-stop work like that. It doesn't mean we didn't have a lot of fun, that we will not listen to music or watch some comedies and so on and so forth. But it's very long work weeks and also very monotonous. And also it was difficult to sort of find ideas at times and such. So I think all of us thought that these 3 months, they didn't pan out right in any way. And I think, now we sort of, at least me and Kasimzdhanov left the team. But I think even before that, we had some kind of evaluation, thinking that next time we really need to do this different because, this was just too much. This was too crazy. And this idea that we will get a lot of work done and it will be helpful, it didn't materialize. And also we spent so much time on it. Maybe it was good for tournaments later, but this was, I think, it was an interesting experience. But I think everybody understood that this is something that you do maximum once in your life.
Okay, yeah. And it's funny, you should mention sort of the idea of you being a disciplinarian. One of the times I interviewed Grandmaster Jan Gustafsson, it was after the Anand files came out, and he mentioned that he really enjoyed the book, but he did say that like his experience working under you didn't really jibe with the way you were sometimes described as a disciplinarian. So do you think that your approach changed in the years where Jan joined Carlsen's team and subsequent years? Yeah,
also I don't necessarily subscribe to this idea that I'm sort of formally a leader and such. I think in the Anand team, I became more like a hub in the way that a huge part of my job is collecting everybody's files so that everybody work independently, but they send their stuff to me, who then gather it in a whole database. And while maybe it sounds like drag and drop, there is more work in that in some sense. So like that, maybe I became the one who was in charge of everything and such. But I think especially for Bonn, I was very ambitious. It was the first time I felt a lot of responsibility. Later, perhaps with experience, you try to do things differently and such. I think also it's kind of different matches. With against Kramnik, we thought preparation will play an incredibly important role, which is quite did. While in other matches, for instance, with Magnus later, we think, okay, we just have to get the guy to play chess. So somehow it's more about finding some creative ideas and getting players out of books and such. So I think it's also becomes very match specific in a way. But there is definitely some truth in it. I think in the earlier matches, but maybe later it's changed like that. And it's nice to Gustav some to say like that. But I think also, well, with Magnus, it's quite a different attitude in a way. And I think also, well, we made a conscious choice, and I think I'm very affected of this 2012 experience in the way that I thought, okay, overdoing things actually probably doesn't work. I mean, the conclusion was also when we start talking about the match is that this work we did for 3 months, I mean, most of it has absolutely no relevance whatsoever because we guessed incredibly poorly. So basically, well, you understand, you sit there, you think, okay, I've spent 3 months of my life. It was pretty cold and dark in Germany. We didn't, and it had absolutely no relevance. That somehow is not a good feeling, I would say. Still interesting from a chess perspective and such, but no. But if I'm enforcing people to work all the time, I think people who knows me well is that no, not really. But
okay, yeah. In reviewing the books, getting ready for this interview, I often think of the Kasimzdhanov quote about like opening preparation for a world championship match is like an iceberg where you can only see the tip and 99% of it is submerged. That definitely comes across in the sort of blow by blow.
Of course. I mean, it's heavily like that, and this is probably necessary for matches because, well, you have this clash of two teams that has been working for so long, and only so little materializes. But basically, you are aware that your opponent has worked so incredibly hard as well, so you try to not let them ambush you, and you try to, of course, somewhat ambush them, but then at least you try to figure out that if both players, let's say, tries to have a balanced strategy, how will things pan out then, and so and such. But well, as you said, if we're not going to go into if Magnus has played his last match or not, then at least I should pretend I want to keep some secrets, right?
Makes sense.
Yeah.
And how did you feel? So Boris Gelfand, of course, legendary classical player, super solid, been at the top for decades, but was ranked number 20 in the world at the time of this match, or at least approximately number 20. But Anand writes in Mindmaster about just feeling like his skills were deteriorating at the time of the match. So what, other than just sheer fatigue and maybe a bit of overexposure to your fellow teammates, how did you feel about about Anand's opponent and about sort of Anand's prospects as you guys convened, Peter?
Well, two different things. So let's start talking about Gelfand. I mean, generally, I think getting to play Gelfand in a World Championship match should be seen as an incredibly good pairings in terms of equity of winning. It was surprising Gelfand won, and Gelfand had also done well in the 2007 World Championship tournament, where he was sort of second after Vishy. But generally, he was not considered among the top 5 or maybe even the top 10 players in the world. So you can argue getting that could be seen as a gift, which is perhaps was to some extent. But it was also very stressful in the way that, well, you understand, we were very proud of what we had achieved till then. That, well, Vishy had won the 2007 World Championship, but then also in 2008 and 2010, he has won his matches. Now, suddenly it felt like, well, it would be possible to sort of reverse the story. Should he actually lose to someone who is the same age as him and seen to be considerably worse, it would look rather bad in a way. But that probably also explains where we were to some extent mentally, that, well, there has been enough wins in a way. I think, well, I mean, that Vishy would just keep on winning matches like this was not seen as so likely at the time. I think we always went to the match believing that there was a good chance, but that it became so many, of course, was not the storyline that was predicted. I mean, I think some people were telling me that, okay, when he won in 2007, this was really his last chance to win a world championship, which luckily was completely wrong. But I think no one, even Vishy or us in the team, had expected that there would be as many as it was in that sense. So, well, I guess that was, I mean, let's say when he actually lost to Magnus, it felt completely natural that would happen. Losing to Gelfand would feel weird because Vishy had always been dominating him in his career. Not dominating fully, but always seen as a stronger player. Then switching to Vishy himself, I think we had a mental problem in the team that we have always seen Vishy as basically a god or something like this, like the best player in the world. You know, he played perfect. Remember in Bonn, he was just calculating incredibly, playing so well and so forth. And I think at some point we started realizing that, well, maybe we have basically fallen in love with what he was rather than thinking about what he actually is at the moment. And that, of course, was... well, it's difficult. How do you handle these kind of things, right? You cannot exactly, well, no, maybe we could have a discussion with Vishy about it and such, but that'll also be uncomfortable in a way. I think me and Kasimzdhanov decided to talk at a hotel room at some point after training, and we spoke for 15 minutes, and Kasim was talking about that, well, you know, I'm actually doing incredibly well when I play in training games with him, which I'm very proud of, but maybe it's not so good and such. Right. And that Vishy's shape is bad. And I think also Vishy was a bit affected that things was not going as well as they used to for him in a way and such. And there's nothing unnatural in that. I mean, he was... well, he was not young at the time for a world championship candidate and such, so it felt natural. But also, well, I think Vishy had done it so many times that also the inspiration was a bit gone in a way. And there, I think, well, for Gelfand it was completely different. I understand that they are both the same age, but for Gelfand this was the first time, and it was incredibly unexpected. So he seemed to come with a lot of positive energy and such. So. I don't know if that answered your question, but at least it took a while.
Yeah, it did. And I want to share a couple more quotes from Mindmaster because, yeah, Vishy, it sounds quite dour, his mindset going into the match. He writes, I felt like a skydiver free-falling face down with no promise of a parachute opening up to save him from a gruesome end. And then later he writes, when I look back at it now, it strikes me that I had stopped growing as a chess player. A younger crop of players was coming up with a fresh set of ideas, and I was slow off the blocks.
Yeah, that was also the storyline at the time, right? That I think, well, Kasparov, for instance, made a bit fun of that it was number X against number Y in the world playing a world championship match and such, right? I think at that point, Magnus was already the highest rated player in the world, I'm pretty sure, and such, right? Yeah, he just chosen not yet to enter the world championship cycle. So, I mean, you can understand the pressure on these guys, but the difference was for Gelfand, this was, a chance he didn't expect, that he always dreamt of. So, of course, he was incredibly motivated, while for Vishy, it was not the reverse. We were definitely motivated. But I think also that we had a 3-month camp was trying to force ourselves to be motivated. And to some extent, it had the effect of almost breaking us in a way. But, well, that's how we chose to do it and how we always did it. It's also, I think we got to realize that while we perhaps were aware of it, it's extremely difficult to change habits that brought you success. It's not that it's superstitious or anything like this, but it's just that you get so painted by your positive memories that you stick with these things, and that you might just have been lucky or something like this. It's hard to force yourself to admit, and then you'll more rather think that you did something clever, and then you'll repeat it again in a way. I mean, well, it's a typical phrase that you shouldn't try and win the new war like you won the old war, but it's it's easy to fall into these kind of habits anyway, I would say.
Yeah. And speaking of how to win the war, did you guys have a sort of overarching match strategy as you got together and talked it over?
No, I wouldn't say that we had that particularly and such, but of course we had some opening strategies and things like that, and probably also some idea of that. Vishy is better in calculations and such. I think. Before Kramnik, it was clear that we thought maybe openings we would be quite sort of equally matched, but that Vishy would be better in dynamic positions. While with Topalov, we thought that opening battles we should avoid, but Vishy is the better player. Against Gelfand, I think we thought Vishy is just better all round in a way. So then it becomes maybe like the situation with Magnus, that if we can create situations where they get to play, the better player will eventually prevail. So I think that was mainly our strategy in that sense. But it's not like we had heavily sort of studied Gelfand's sort of strategies and such to extract things. Also, it's a bit weird that when you play Gelfand, you have a whole career, but he's not played any kind of world championship matches. So you lack a bit of information how he behaves in this kind of situations. So it was strange for us in the way that we thought Gelfand perhaps is Vishy's age, but he's still some kind of mystery.
Eventually, obviously, you guys go to Moscow. Now, Peter, is there anything else you feel we should review before we actually get to the match?
No, I mean, I think I said that the third month of the camp actually started to become better in a way. The strange fond memory I had is that together with Kasimzdhanov, we decided, and this sounds completely insane, right? We have been in Bad Soden. This is the third training camp. So the third match we prepared together for. But we have spent maybe, 9 months, a year in Bad Soden together. Only in the third month of the third match, we get this idea. Why don't we go to Frankfurt one evening just to relax and get a bit away of everything? We have never ever done that before. But on that, with like 2 weeks left, we decided on the free day, why don't we go to Frankfurt and watch a movie? And this was basically breaking news for us. No one has ever done that in our team. It's completely impossible for me to explain why we chose to keep this kind of camp mentality, where the only thing you see is your teammates and computers. But we went to Frankfurt, and suddenly we thought, okay, wow, there is people, there is a light, there is a cinema and such. I mean, even I think the cinema actually broke down, so we had to sit for 45 minutes and wait till they fixed the device to display it. But we just basically had fun and had a bit to eat and such. And I think the others didn't join us, and they thought it was a bit strange. But it just somehow, for me, paints a picture of that. Basically, you try to completely shut yourself in. You completely immerse yourself in these things, but then later you think, why did we do it like that? But I think, again, for the first match, we were so incredibly motivated that we didn't think in these directions. But later we did. But somehow, I think me and Kasim thought later, okay, this we should have done every Sunday. This is a great way to get your mind off and such. But it's mainly that the thought didn't appear. That is the striking thing. We were so obsessed with chess and such. But I remember also we played Bundesliga some weeks before and had a short break from the training camp, and that also felt like a nice break and such. But I think generally, what I recall from this training camp is mainly tiredness. Also, I think when I mentioned I visited my girlfriend in Lithuania, but basically when I came there, I slept for like 14 hours. It was a tough time, and it sort of I think we didn't come with that many good memories, which meant also that we came to Moscow in a rather tired state. And that's basically an unforgivable sin in many ways. And I think also it's obvious it affected Vishy. You saw that he was not sort of speaking of it as a very pleasant thing. So I think the training camp and the first more than half of the match in Moscow is things that we are not that proud of. But then luckily, when it really mattered, somehow, we got there in the end.
Okay, listeners, we are headed to Moscow, but first we're going to take a break and we will be right back. Perpetual Chess is proud to be brought to you in part by Chessable.com, the leading chess education platform. Chessable, of course, uses its proprietary Move Trainer technology, which has spaced repetition to help you learn opening sequences, tactical patterns, basic endgames, all of which it will quiz you on repeatedly until you have it down cold. They have courses both for free and for purchase. One of their newest includes the Beginner's 1D4 Repertoire by popular and entertaining YouTube commentator and streamer IM Andras Toth. So if you're just looking to get your feet wet in an opening, it is a great intro. And of course, they also have intermediate classics like Endgame Strategy and tons of advanced opening courses that you can check out for free or for purchase at chessable.com. And we are back. So, Peter, I'd like to hear about the general mindset in Moscow, but I'm also curious, as someone who's obviously played very high-level chess, although not personally, you haven't played for a world championship personally, but how do your nerves as a trainer for a world championship contender compare to your nerves when you're going to play in a big match yourself? How do they compare?
They are different. I think now I've gotten used to it and such, but it depends, of course, on the situation in the match and things like that. But I think in 2013, I played my last tournament. And I recall it was a lesson in how stressful it is actually to play yourself. So probably it's much calmer in many ways to be a second. Maybe I'm just extremely spoiled that I'm the second of Magnus. So you get to win quite often, and losing is a very rare occurrence. But being a second is stressful in a different way, but of course it's very stressful. For instance, of course, what's incredibly stressful is the opening phase because, you have worked on this for really a long time, and as you say, I'm the one responsible for perhaps the structure of the preparation. So if something happens that we hadn't expected, or there's a huge hole or something like that, that, of course, would feel very bad, not to mention that you could lose your job and things like that. For instance, how it started in Sofia. Imagine we worked for a very, very long time preparing Vishy's openings for the World Championship match, and he loses in 2 hours with black, right? It's not supposed to happen. It should basically be impossible, and it's not like Topalov played something very new. He just played what he almost always did, and we completely collapsed there. Well, things like that happens, but this phase, of course, is extremely nervous. It can sound a bit selfish that you are more nervous about the opening phase rather than the actual result, but I think it's just logical because that's what you're responsible for in a way. But of course you're nervous also. It sounds like 9 years too early to talk about Magnus's match, right? If we do a 10-year delay. But, game 6 from the last match, it's 2.5, and it swings back and forth at some point in time pressure. Of course, I'm not capable to sleep, but if you play, maybe it's worse. On the other hand, sometimes when you play, you're so much into it that you don't really feel it. You just play. But I still think it's quite more stressful to be a player than a second. But for instance, once I did the commentary for the candidates tournaments together with my now wife, and that was a much less stressful experience. This idea that there is no result, you don't have to be prepared and to that extent was much less stressful. So I will say that it's stressful, but in a different way. Perhaps also being used to it helps. I guess also that's one of the reasons. That Magnus invited me to his team. That he wanted someone who has been in this situation a lot of times, so that the stress level would be less. Because you get more and more used to it. But of course, it's never going to feel trivial, and it shouldn't.
Makes sense. And when you make your way to the tournament venue, I know it was written in the book, of course, in recent years with Team Magnus, part of the team likes to decamp to Thailand or similar places, but I believe that everyone came to Moscow, all four trainers, is that correct?
For sure. We were all going to Moscow together. I think Gajewski, good friend of Wojtaszek, but now, he used to be later become Vishy's main coach, was helping us a bit online, but it's correct that in Team Vishy, he would always bring us 4 seconds to the venue. And, that meant that we could have sort of sessions together, all of us. Vishy would basically come to the workroom and work with us. We would have drills where we would repeat lines to check if he remembered it and discuss things and so on and so forth. But you are right that we had a very nice workroom where it's basically 4, or if Vishy was there, 5 guys sitting there with computers, and we would basically draw the curtains so we could see, not get distracted. But we had a absolutely stunning view. I remember that someone, Erik van Reem, was there, and he was doing a block where he put up this picture of the sort of the view to the Kremlin and the Red Square at night. And I thought, wow, that looks insanely beautiful. And I asked him, where did you take it? He said, well, try and draw the curtains. And I did. So he's taken it in our workroom. But so we had a spectacular view there. And I think also at some point when they had the 9th of May parades, we were looking out of the windows, and they called from the hotel and said, no, close the windows. They cannot have people, for security reasons, sort of looking out like that. So, because, I don't know, maybe they were afraid we would shoot or something like that. But, we had generally excellent surroundings, but when sort of the stakes get high, basically you just draw the curtains and start working like that. So basically, we have 4 or 5 guys sitting with our laptops working and analyzing chess and discussing things together.
And Peter, it was the same team as the prior World Championship team, but is there any thought of trying to not be spotted? Like in the recent candidates, everyone's talking about which trainer is with which player. Was there any of that dynamic at work with Anand's team in 2012?
I think, for instance, Leko was helping us in a camp before the match, and he was also there during commentary and came and helped a little bit now and then. I mean, such things we wouldn't release, but I think it is less so, because in these days where you didn't really work as much online as you do now, they had to be there physically. So that we would not hide. But of course, you would have some kind of external help, and that you would very much hide. For instance, during this match, we got help from first Michael Adams and then later Mike Shane. And they was just sending us stuff online. This, of course, we would keep completely secret. So I think ideally we would like to keep it secret, but I think at some point, Vishy said that, Nielsen is coming, he's too big to keep a secret anyway, but that goes for all of us. I mean, information you cannot hide, you can just as well volunteer to give, was our policy at least.
Yeah, it makes sense. And on the topic of the testing Vishy's memory in various openings, what was the methodology for that? Were you using any flashcards? Were you using a board or just telling him moves? How did that work? No, we were using a board. For some reason, I have a picture from 2010 in Sofia of our workroom, and it's basically a room that is in a complete mess. You see computers, you see paper towels, empty bottles and stuff like this, and you see a lot of heavy computers. But in the background, you can see there is actually a chessboard, which is kind of unusual for our training camps. But this was not a training camps, it was a match. So I think 1 hour before, we would set up positions on the board and basically drill Vishy for half an hour over the most important details and make sure that he remembers these things and such. So that we would do to quite some extent. It's completely different from how things are done with Magnus, I would say. But that's how we did it with Vishy. So there would be he would meet us in the morning, talk about with us what we've been analyzing at night, and then I think after the morning session he will go and maybe have a nap, shower, these kind of things, relax, and then come maybe 1.5 hours to 1 hour before the game and do sort of the last drills, depending on the current situation. If he would be worried about some detail, he would come earlier and so on and so forth, right? But he would definitely set at a board. We will ask him questions and we will have an idea what to take him through. But of course, he might have some questions himself, and we will try to answer those. And are you able to say how you work differently with Magnus when helping him memorize lines?
No, but Magnus is generally, he's much more on his own. So I think it's no secret that I think Magnus generally sits with. There is only me on location, and we will speak about prep and such. But I will generally send him some files. So it's not like we would sit. I mean, Magnus takes full responsibility himself. He gets stuff from his seconds, and then he figures out how he wants to use it and such. So it's a completely different style. But I think also it's important to have people having their own style. For instance, when at some point I spoke about the match in 2008, well, it was clear that Vishy prevailed opening-wise in that match. And we would like to tell the story. That's because we have a much more open-minded structure that people can look at whatever they want and such, while in Team Kramnik, they are just told, you look at this, and you don't communicate with each other. And based on 2008, it sounds like, Vishy's strategy is the best, Kramnik's is crap. But then Kramnik was the guy who took down Kasparov with exactly the same method. So, I think people should do what works for them. At least that's my experience working with the two I've been allowed to work with.
Okay. And with Vishy, were there any sort of mnemonic devices or catchphrases, or was it just straight up chess lines and positions?
I think mainly chess lines and such, but also, you learn. I mean, we were all, of course, influenced by this disaster in Sofia in game one, right? Where Vishy remembered that at some point he should play King F7, but he played it one move too early and just lost immediately or something like this. So it's something that you try and, remember certain details. But I think also at that point, I started realizing that my responsibility, it's very tempting as a second to give too much information, because then you protect yourself from criticism. Because, you can always tell him that, it wasn't your file, right? But if you give so much information, they can't remember it. You're only protecting yourself. You're not trying to help the guy you work for. So I think we started to realize that at some point, and we started to try and limit it to an extent. That, of course, has the problem that sometimes you haven't given enough info, but there is no particular solution to that. It's going to be, game to game, what you think is relevant or not. But I don't think we had any kind of special methods in that. I think also, it could be that we do it rather low level because we are experts in chess, but we don't know that much else. We don't have, it would make sense to study these things on an academical level, but we don't really have time for that because we have to check openings and such. I remember, for instance, that at some point we were pretty happy that we started to understand that you could use entrants remotely, and that we used for the World Championship in 2008. I'm not sure we did it in 7. But the funny thing was that the software we was using, I think, was written in 2003. So apparently there was definitely some years before where we could have done it, but we just didn't know it existed and such. So despite competing for the World Championship, it doesn't necessarily mean that you are into all these kind of details. I remember another thing that I was having a lovely lunch with the Demis Hassabis, the sort of DeepMind founder and creator of Alpha Zero, and we spoke about a lot of details and such. It was very interesting. But at some point he asked me, who is actually the computer expert in your team? And I said, I think that's me. And he looked a bit weirdly at me based on the conversation we had. But that's how it's done at times.
Yeah, no one wants to call themselves a computer expert in front of Demis Hassabis.
No, I didn't do it like that. But I said that I didn't call myself an expert, but he sort of, so who is responsible for these, things? And that's probably also me. It's just that, I would like someone else to do it, but if no one does it, it's my job to do it, right?
Yeah, so, makes sense. Yeah. Okay, so we get to the games, and in game 1, Gelfand, as far as I've read, greatly surprises your team with the Grunfeld. You didn't expect that?
No, this was basically a disaster. No, it actually wasn't a disaster, but that basically became a joke in the team that, unfortunately, I'm rightly quoted for saying at some point that, okay, what is the likelihood for that Gelfand will play the Grunfeld? And I also said the same about the Svesnikov. He has basically not played these openings his whole life, and my argument was, okay, the guy is not young. He didn't expect to play a World Championship match. If he had some openings he really believed in, he would have played them earlier. There is a reason that at plus 40 he's not played these openings. So I thought it's completely ridiculous to spend a lot of energy on having a repertoire like that. So the decision was only to have some very, very small lines ready. That completely failed. The idea we had against the Svestikov, we'll come to that game later, was embarrassing. But surprisingly, despite not believing it would happen at all, we had a pretty good idea against the Grunfeld. This bishop b5 check and some sacrifice of the exchange. I think it was even Jan Gustafsson who tipped me that this was kind of reasonable. And it's not a good idea. It's just a forced draw. But it's so rare that I think at that time, for instance, Boris Avrukh has made a book about the Grunfeld, and it wasn't mentioned there. So at least, we're sticking to this strategy that I talked about, that when you prepare so much, at least you try to make sure that if they spring a big surprise on you, you have some kind of safety net to fall in. And the safety net was pretty good in this here. It was actually a quite dangerous one-game idea, and had Vishy remembered his prep better, he would have put him under considerable pressure, if I remember correctly. I think that maybe he should have played bishop f4, or maybe bishop f4 was the wrong move. I haven't checked right now, but Vishy remembered some kind of detail in his prep. But also, it becomes also absurd if I criticize him for not remembering his preparation against the Grunfeld, but at the same time not tell him, no way Grunfeld is happening, please look at something relevant instead. But no, we had very interesting preparations in the Nimzo-Indian and other areas, like I would expect Semislav and such, but that didn't happen. So no, this in the sort of guessing game, it was a complete disaster. But then we actually had some kind of backup plan that was quite reasonable, and I think it was something that we added with a few days to go even. Because, in this 3-month camp, I have basically said that, okay, Grunfeld, forget about it, it's just not going to happen. And we barely put any kind of work. So it was a strange start to the match in the way that, you can imagine, we had done so much work in the Nimzo-Indian and the Queen's Gambit declined, and maybe also some Semislav, and now we just say, okay, he's playing the Grunfeld. We had half an idea there. We have used it. We have no idea what to do next. All had to be invented on the spot.
Right, and you've got mere days to think about it, and you've got to think about the black repertoire as well.
Exactly,
and
yeah.
They've been working on this for months, perfecting it. So
yeah, this was it didn't feel like we had done much right the last 4 months at the time.
And then we have a string of draws, Peter. So, yeah. Certainly at moments, both players have chances. So I don't know how much you want to go into detail about the first 6 games that were draws.
The black games were not that inspiring. We basically was doing this kind of very concrete opening solution styles that, I think Ogor has written about it, for instance, that there is different kind of openings. There's either the sort of the good openings that, it doesn't depend on a very concrete solution to get equality. You have many moves and it's more common sense and solid by itself. Vishy was playing slightly differently there. We played some line, we call it maybe the triangle, because it puts pawns on a6, c6 and e6. And it's maybe a bit subpar, but we tried to have some long forced solutions everywhere and such. And I think it worked, if I remember, quite well for the first 3 games. We managed to spring a lot of surprises, and maybe only one of the games Vishy was under kind of some pressure, right? While the others, he solved his problems easily. But Gelfand was basically just being solid also. The thing we hoped for, that Gelfand would overpress and be too optimistic, didn't happen at all. We hoped that maybe we could provoke Gelfand into some complex battles. For instance, in this setup that we played, White has some areas where Black gets to play, but Gelfand was doing it cleverly and completely made sure Vishy didn't get to do what he liked and just had to memorize theory and try to equalize in a dry way. And no, Gelfand was impressive in that sense. I mean, he didn't try to rush events and anything. He trusted that he would be able to do things well with black. And of course, it was frustrating for us that the draws just kept rolling in, because we basically saw ourselves as big favorites. And well, if you're the big favorite, the shorter the match in reality becomes when you just make a lot of draw, the more randoms you're going to feel, the more pressure you're going to be under. So this was generally not a good feeling. And I think, as you mentioned also, then at some point, I forgot it was it game 3 or game 5 that was the Svesnikov?
5, yeah.
5, yeah. So in game 3, we at least tried this F3 Grunfeld, which became... well, we had looked a bit at it before the match. It wasn't really ready and such, but then, well, we decided that would be fun to play. And I think especially Gajewski was also helping a lot with interesting ideas. But Gelfand had some, novel concept, and it became a very interesting game. But it was sort of unclear who was sort of in charge of that. But generally, just a very good game. But again, we allowed Gelfand to spring a novelty on us, which was not ideal. So, and in game 5, it just became worse. We decided to switch to 1e4. We were obviously well prepared against his Petrov and his Naidov. He came up with, and I think we thought maybe he will go to the Berlin. At least that would be a logical choice for him. We had some not good but interesting ideas there. But he played the Svesnikov, and it was, he played the Svesnikov, and all we had of preparation was that we basically played the main line without any kind of idea, and just Gelfand showed us what he's been preparing for weeks, and it was a quick draw. So, after 6 games, the mood was not good. Nothing was working. Vishy didn't get to be Vishy in the sense of getting positions where he could try and play what he's good at and such. We lacked opening ideas, so there was some kind of desperation, I would say. And I think this was maybe at the time where we start. At World Championship matches, you always try to cash in all kind of favors you have from friends and such. But I think Kasim got in touch with Michael Adams at this point, and he was very helpful to us in terms of that we got pointed to that maybe the Rosalimo was a good choice. And at that time, he was sort of not seen as very principled. Of course, nowadays it's the main thing, but that was very different then.
Okay, and listeners, it's going to get worse before it gets better when we get to Game 7. But first, we're going to take one more break and hear from our sponsors. I've been playing Blitz a little bit better lately, so I figured I'd check out what's going on with my game from our friends at Aimchess.com. And what I discovered is I'm not blundering as much, so that's good news. My openings continue to be reasonably strong, especially with black. I still have things to improve, still trying to get better at playing faster, especially in Blitz, and converting advantages and even resourcefulness. But the good thing is that Aimchess shows you positions where you didn't play to your full strength, and you're able to either practice against the computer or learn from it, practice specific openings, tactics that you missed, etc. You can do all this stuff on aimchess.com. So please use the link in the show description to check it out. And if you decide to subscribe, use the link or the code perpetual30 on aimchess.com. And we are back. So as we alluded to in Game 7, Boris Gelfand strikes first. He wins the game. So what are your recollections of that fateful moment, Peter?
Yeah, that was... Well, it's surprising, a bit of apathy to some extent, right? It's also... Well, you can start doubting yourself. It's also, well, why do we keep playing the same opening over and over again? I think was part of our reasoning. Also, well, I think... Game 6 and 7 is when the colors doubles, right? So in the first 3 set of games, Vishy had white first. Now Gelfand had white first. So this is the first time where they had a free day where the next game would be white. So it would be logical they came up with some kind of new idea. But that we didn't have the courage to change openings at that time was, with hindsight, weak. Of course, you can argue it's hindsight because he lost, but we did have our other ideas and openings ready, so we really should have done that. But Gelfand had a small idea. He got a slightly better position, and Vishy was not able to neutralize it, and just lost very, very sort of without much effort in a way. Gelfand just played a very good game. Vishy didn't put up resistance, and it was kind of shocking for us to see, no doubt about that. And no, we're still getting to the stage where just nothing has gone right for us for a very long time. And I think at that point we start realizing that, well, actually, Vishy could lose this. And well, I don't think we had that impression or sort of had this mentality. I think we thought it's always going to be okay at some point. But I think obviously the one who was most affected was Vishy. I think, well, now we know he wins the next game. And he says at the press conference there that he didn't get much sleep at night. And I think after game 7, maybe there was one time earlier in the match, but it's probably the only time he asked me, let's actually go for a walk, just the two of us, sort of, just to talk. And I think we basically went from the hotel in the direction of the Red Square and back, mainly just talking a bit about life, a little bit about the match and such, but I think it's to somehow, well, talk with your oldest second, just to try and rebuild confidence a bit, try to feel some kind of closeness. But it's an obvious sign that, of course, he was very nervous at the time. There's no doubt about it. And it was a strange moment there, because just so little were working, and we seemed to have no idea how to sort of get out of it in any way. But, well, of course, in this situation, I think you try to just compensate by working even harder in a way. And, well, working harder didn't work for us with this 3-month camp. But I think at sort of World Championship matches, well, working harder actually pays off to some extent, because I think our experience is that the work before is more to sort of cover all the bases and be ready. But the real creative work, the work that really matters, is during the matches, when you start getting a lot of information from your opponents and such. I think, now at least we knew he's going to go the Grunfeld. And when we played F3 against the Grunfeld, we knew, okay, he had this prepared. What's going to happen next, we don't know. But at least we certainly have some kind of target. And sort of being behind, we thought, okay, this F3 Grunfeld would be a very interesting area for us to explore. So I think at least we came with it with quite some optimism. But I think we also understood that, especially as the game progressed in the beginning, that it's going to be some kind of Benoni position. Vishy has very little experience with that. It can also be that the match is practically over by today, but it certainly didn't end up like that.
Yes, and we'll get to game 8 in a second. Just a couple more things in the mindset after the game 7 loss. In Mindmaster, Viswanathan wrote, and he described a sort of dour mindset even before game 7, just because the opening surprises that you alluded to felt like you guys weren't making much headway with either color. And then he writes, after game 7, it was clear that Gelfand wasn't troubled or impressed by our opening choices. And then, Peter, we have a question from the Perpetual Chess Patreon mailbag, some of which you've just touched on, but some of which hopefully you could flesh out a little more. This is from a friend of the podcast, Chris Wainscott, who writes, in such a short match, what changes about the approach when the opponent takes the lead, as Gelfand did in game 7? Do you stay the course with your original plan as long as you can, or do you change the approach right away? And he also writes, congrats on the Chicken Chess Club. I'm loving it, and go Berish Politz Nielsen.
Okay. I don't know how many things I should thank for, so I'll just give a big thank you for all of it. And then return to the question. I mean, there's not a lot of time. I mean, well, think of Pune Pomyachi in the previous World Championship match, right? He actually lost the game after midnight. You have to sleep and you have to play the next game at 3 o'clock. You don't really have time. Well, maybe you lie awake at night and such, but to sit down and think about which strategies to change, we didn't do much. I think basically, well, we had prepared this F3, which is pretty sharp. Now it was definitely the way to go. But I think the general sort of lessons are that it's only after 3 days that people actually get to sort of change their strategy. And I think it sounds strange, but I have very little experience with actually the one I was helping being behind with a 3 day. I mean, Vishy was behind a couple of times, but he somehow always managed to equalize. So there was no 3 day to go and think about, okay, actually now we're behind, how are we going to deal with this situation and such. There was maybe once with Magnus and Kayakin, but that's all I remember. So I think it just comes down to opening ideas, and well, there's still a lot of games left, so it's not sort of desperate, but I think it's more this idea starts coming creeping that, okay, actually it's very possible for you to lose this match. Of course, with Topalov and with Kramnik, we knew that it was very likely to lose the match and such, but I think just at this point, Vishy was just seen as such a big favorite against Gelfand that we also somehow had lulled ourselves into this idea that he could actually lose is not it's not really realistic, and then suddenly start feeling like that, and of course you become nervous, and well, I guess we also start feeling guilty to some extent, because as you describe it, Vishy didn't get a lot of help in the openings that we would like to give him and such. So I mean, now it turns out well. Now we actually starts creating quite some opening novelties in the latter phase, so it ends up well. But of course, had it gone the other way, it would have been a pretty sad story overall. As I said, there is not much good news to tell at this point.
Yeah, but luckily Vishy, well, I should say, I mean, I'm a big fan of both Gelfand and Vishy.
So am I.
So I'm only telling this from the sort of protagonist point of view. But with that in mind, I'll say, luckily for Vishy, he bounced back strong, and as you said, got a King's Indian / Benoni structure in the opening, and Gelfand made a small mistake early and then a bigger mistake and lost in 17 moves. So quick relief.
It was basically just a miscalculation from Gelfand, and it cost him the point, and you can even argue possibly the match and such. It happens. I mean, I have tremendous respect for the way Gelfand was doing it. I mean, he just tries to play chess. He, as you said, he didn't seem to change his strategy. He thought that this is the right way to play against f3, so I will do it. And also, history has proven that this is actually the popular choice for Black. You can, of course, argue that it's risky and he should play something more solid. But, well, it's not that easy to do. And to suddenly start changing your strategy just because you come ahead is also kind of weird. A bit hindsight, maybe he should have done it. But, well, this was, for us, of course, it was a gift falling down from the sky, right? Things has gone badly, Vishy was behind, and suddenly it's equal again. But also, yes, the score is equal, but the momentum has completely changed. I mean, we've been very much down. Suddenly we win, and it makes a huge difference. I mean, of course, if you have to swap wins, you would much rather win the latter one, because it's you who suddenly have momentum and such. But, well, this was, it was really a pity for Gelfand. And as you say that, well, I see these things as a sport event, and you're on one team, so you're allowed to root for them. I mean, I think Gelfand is a great guy, and that the world would maybe have been a better place had Gelfand also been world champion at some point. But I mean, it's sport, so you try to win. I think there's nothing wrong with that, right? But this was very, very puzzling. Also, that you understand, for 7 games, it was so difficult to create any kind of chances, and then suddenly, boom, one mistake, and it happens. And it is sad for Gelfand that the only game he loses in a world championship match is going to be from a blunder like that. But I mean, well, Vishy did put him under pressure. He did punish it well and such. There's not much else he can do. And I mean, not from here on, but well, of course, it changes the momentum for us in a way. But I think we are mainly puzzled, mainly just happy, because at this point, things have not started to turn our way yet.
Yeah, and I want to share, Peter, an amazing quote from Mindmaster that by Viswanathan Anand, who writes, of the moment where he spotted where he could trap Gelfand's queen, which led to him resigning in this extremely important game 8, he writes, I felt my heart hammering against my ribs. My legs began to seize and my mind screamed, oh my God, I'm going to win this game. I gulped down the euphoria and held up an exterior of calm. Just a few minutes left. Don't botch this up. Remember the notes? When you were winning, go get some tea. Gelfand sat there thinking for what seemed like an eternity. He resigned soon after I returned to the board. I had swum out of the undertow. So for any listeners enjoying this podcast who haven't read Mind Master, definitely recommend it.
Very, very much so. Well, it reminds me a bit of, I cannot remember which of, if it was game 3 or game 5 from Bonn, but it was a bit the same there. I mean, Vishy sees some kind of trick and then he hopes the opponent falls into it. But these moments can be incredibly tense when you sort of, that there is quite a likelihood your opponent will blunder and then you're going to win. And this is a very, very nervous moment. I mean, then you can feel your pulse running and so on and so forth, right? This is, but it's also strange that somehow, I wouldn't say it feels unjust winning this game, but I have a lot of positive emotions from this match, but somehow game 8, not really. It was just, it was a nice gift, but I mean, as a second, there's not much to be proud of. Even as a player, there's not that much else to do than collect the point and go home, right?
Yeah. I mean, and just one more thing about that quote, like from the club player's perspective, Peter, like it's rare that I find someone like Anand relatable, even though he's gentleman and personable, but just his chess skills are so out of this world. But when he describes emotions like that, to me, we all feel the same thing.
Yeah.
So it's,
No, but I think the human emotions are not very different depending on your level, I would say, right? I mean, they strike me as very, very similar. But of course, the good players play better. That's perhaps the difference, right? And
well said.
Maybe also there's more at stake in terms of prestige and finance. But I think these emotions that we feel ourselves, depending on our level, are more or less the same, whatever skill you are, even if you're world championship level. At least that's my impression.
Yeah. So we get back to the chess. Game 9, Anand with black finally ditches the Slav, switches to the Nimzo. What are your recollections of that? The games heading into the playoffs, Peter?
Well, another disaster opening-wise, as far as I remember. It's also, again, Gelfand plays the Nimzo with e3. That was pretty low on our list. We would expect he would play Catalans, maybe Queen's Gambit, maybe Queen C2 Nimzo, which we prepared ourselves as white and such, that he would play E3 Nimzo. Well, basically, the E3 Nimzo was not supposed to give white any kind of advantage. It doesn't, and it didn't do it at that time. But because of this line called the Karpov system that Vishy played in game 9. But of course, Gelfand had some kind of idea, and Gelfand did things cleverly. I mean, he just decided on, let's say, Svesnikov, Grunfeld, and Nimzo with e3 that he thought these things are going to be unpleasant for Vishy. He doesn't like to play against it and such. I mean, that he was very impressive. And also, I think Gelfand's idea was that against the sort of expected response that, white would, he had some idea that he would be slightly better, and he could play a bit from there. But I mean, Gelfand had this realistic approach of, he was not trying to get huge advantages with white. He was just trying to get playable positions. And that surprised us because we came with the impression that Vishy was the better player. So that Gelfand would avoid trying to play chess. But it seemed like Gelfand disagreed with that. Or maybe Gelfand just thought that a world championship match is to find out who is the best player. So I'm going to play as well as I can. And if I don't win, it's fair enough. I mean, no, Gelfand was a very tricky opponent. And once again, he kind of outsmarted us, I would say. Is this the game where Vishy gives up the pair of bishops? I forgot. He takes an f3.
I would have to check that. I have in my notes that he narrowly held a fortress rook and knight versus
queen
exactly.
This is where he does this. Vishy does one thing that is incredibly impressive. In some position, Vishy plays this typical idea. Bishop takes f3, and the idea is when you take back to the queen, like Gelfand did, you play e5. Some very famous Karpov game. This was, obviously some difference here. But the problem was that Vishy played bishop, he executed bishop takes f3, queen takes f3, and he realized, okay, my intended e5 just loses, basically. And then he plays something else. But also, well, then bishop takes f3 is completely ridiculous. And it's obvious that Vishy understands immediately that, well, I've just given away my strong bishop for his knight. It's completely hopeless to do like that. But he shows a lot of emotional control. And it would be so easy to take an f3 when he takes back to the queen. Okay, damn it, I don't have anything else on e5, play it and then lose. But there he was actually very calm and defended extremely well. Gelfand could maybe have won. Maybe he could, instead of taking the queen, he could have got different things. But, well, there's no, simply bishop takes f3 is such a bad move that Gelfand got all these chances. But I was very impressed that Vishy was able just to admit, okay, I've done something horrible. Let me at least not make it worse. And he was not, well, the main problem is that it looks so embarrassing what he did. But that emotion he was actually managing to stop and just try to, okay, I'm going to optimize my chances. I don't give a damn if I'm going to look stupid. So this I was very happy to see. And of course that he managed to draw it with some luck was huge because, well, imagine we have just gotten this gift in game 8. And if then Vishy gives it all away by some very stupid oversight, that would have been a difficult psychological blow. Obviously, the match would not have been over, but no, that would have been tough.
Yeah, and obviously only 3 games left after that. So, and circling back to your discussion of how impressed you were with Boris Gelfand's approach in terms of opening selection, have you? I'm sure you've read a little bit about how he may have approached it. Have you had any discussions with Boris about his match strategy?
No, unfortunately not. I mean, it would be very interesting to have these kind of debriefings with opponents. But somehow, well, it's also, maybe it's a bit rude to ask. I mean, he actually lost. Maybe it's bad memories and such. It would maybe be easier if he approached us. But for instance, recently I was at chess summer camp in Charlotte, and Topalov was not one of the other people giving lessons there, and I spoke a bit with him about the match. And Topalov, he has no problem speaking openly about these things, so we were discussing some things. It was quite interesting to hear and such. But I mean, well, that should probably be done in more detail about all the games. But really, Topalov was talking about his supercomputer, but also some of the opening ideas. For instance, this game 1 that he won so easily and such. He was also saying that, this was something they also, I didn't prepare it that much. I've forgotten the details of what he said, but no, this would be extremely nice, and I hope that someone should bring us together and buy us a beer and put on a recorder at some point. Right?
Yeah. It sounds like something I should do.
You come to mind, right? So
I'll go to Charlotte for that.
That would be very interesting to talk with people about it. For instance, Laurent Fressinet was the second for Kramnik, and I was for Vishy. So of course we were exchanging these kind of memories. But I think to sort of compare notes now that it's possible due to the computer age would be some interesting project to do at some point. But people still want to keep their secrets and such. But I think it would be interesting to have this sort of talks like that. But I think I have only done it with Topalov, and again we are talking about 10 minutes when we are sitting in the back of a taxi going back and forth, right? Not in a very structured manner. Also, I think none of us was having our notes in front of us, so on and so forth.
Well, but Peter, there has been a lot of discussion about the alleged supercomputer of Topalov's. As we discussed last time, it struck fear in your hearts during the match, but subsequently Grandmaster Cheparinov, who was on Topalov's team, has said it was a bit overblown. So could you share any of what
I think Topalov said exactly the same. I mean, also Cheparinov probably has worked much more with it than Topalov in the sense that I don't think it was fully ready and set up with chess. I think this problem of scaling a supercomputer to work with chess is not that simple. I mean, before the Nepomniachtchi match, I was also part of some kind of online conference where people from the Skolkovo University was also there, and they were sort of saying that, the supercomputer they have in Skolkovo, they lent to Nepomniachtchi, they also had problems with scaling and such. And the AlphaZero guys was there, and I was there, and I was sort of sort of really, I was about to shout out, please don't tell them if you know how to scale it properly, because we don't need him to have an even stronger computer for the match, right?
Was this conference before or after the
Yeah,
World
this was
Championship?
during some World Cup, so like 3 months before the World
Wow.
Championship. There was this online conference with me, guys from Skolkovo, and then someone from DeepMind. But no, I don't think that DeepMind didn't give them any secrets, and I think Skolkovo guys made a good impression, but they were openly saying that this scaling a supercomputer to work with these classical computer chess programs is apparently not that easy. But as I said before, I'm not an expert to that extent.
Okay. Well, bringing it back to the match, Peter, as you alluded to earlier, Game 10, you spring the Rossolimo, courtesy of Grandmaster Mickey Adams' help, but still another draw.
Yeah, and somehow we were not quite there yet. I mean, we went to the Rossolimo. Gelfand played 3e6. I think the game was castles knight e7, then b3, or did we go b3 first?
Yeah, b3 and then e5, yeah.
Sorry. We took on c6. Yeah, so it was bishop b5, e6, bishop c6, b takes c6, and then b3. And that we thought was very promising. But again, Gelfand showed excellent preparation. He had this move, 5e5, that we have only touched on very, very briefly. We thought this ending appearing was slightly better for white, but it turned out not really to be. I mean, Gelfand again managed to frustrate us a lot with his preparation. But you are right that there the Rossolimo started, but somehow it didn't really work either. So at this point, the wide openings simply were not working at all. But I think here something kind of clicked, at least among the seconds and such, because I think maybe it was Kasimzdhanov. I mean, we had to decide what are we going to do for game 11. And I think Kasimzdhanov said, okay, I'm so sick and tired of being surprised all the time. Now I'm going to invent some kind of sideline, and Gelfand has not prepared, and I'm going to make it work. And basically, from here on, I mean, the first 10 games, Gelfand was dominating opening-wise. There's absolutely no doubt about that. But the remaining part here is still something I'm very proud of, because now suddenly we start spraying out interesting concepts and putting Gelfand on tremendous pressure. I mean, somehow we managed to exploit all the energy all the information we have gathered for the first part of the match. But of course, we have to praise ourselves. Very lucky that the situation is not worse than it was at the time. But from here on, suddenly things starts to actually work very well. And I mean, as I said, the most creative work has to be done during the match. But of course, that it has to be done, that we only start succeeding with it when there is a couple of games left. It's not ideal. But the last part of the match is something I'm very proud of, no doubt.
Yeah, it seemed like in reading the history, it seemed like in the rapid playoff in particular, you guys managed to keep
but
even
even game 12, I think we were very proud of. I mean, game 11 became the Nimzo-Indian, but instead of the Karpov line with b6, bishop b7, Kasim insisted on let's try bishop d7 to c6. And it looks strange. Why not put the bishop on a more safe square on b7? But it has some pluses and minuses. And that we managed to make work very well. And for a change, it was Vishy who knew the details, not Gelfand. And, I think it was a pretty decent game and a draw. But I remember a considerable change of mood in the team. Like now, we were so tired of being chased and being unsuccessful that now we thought, okay, it's our turn to spring the surprises. And, I think also that affected Vishy, that there was suddenly some positive energy again. But, I mean, basically that's my storyline, that from January 15 till game 10, I mean, we didn't manage much, but then somehow when it really mattered, it became good again. As I said, game 11 was this bishop d7 to c6 of Kasim. Game 12 was, I think, even more interesting. This was this Rossolimo, and then bishop takes c6, b takes c6 again. And now we played a very strange move order, d3, knight e7, b3. this was something that occurred to me not in a dream, but after game 11, when falling asleep, I started thinking about it. And I remember being so tired that I thought, okay, should I actually go up and write a note? I said, no, I'm too tired, I'm just going to sleep. But I remembered the next morning, and the point of the move order is that after b3 and move 5, you saw Gelfand play e5. And that was quite strong. So now, well, we played d3, and then he's forced to go knight e7. Well, he's not, because now queen c7 is topical, but at that time, you thought you were forced to play knight e7, and then we played the move b3. And this looks incredibly weird, but it has quite some pluses. And somehow it makes the b3 concept that we really wanted for game 10 possible, but there is pluses and minuses. But suddenly we started analyzing a very strange concept, but became sort of experts in it. And it turned out to be much more venomous than we actually thought. And especially, I forgot what happened after, I think after knight e7, b3, did he play d6?
I would have to call the game up.
But for instance, there was lines like d6. We wanted to play e5. Then he takes it. We play knight e5. That is the move queen to d4. But there were some incredibly sharp lines after that. And we analyzed these things to great details. They're not necessarily better for white, but they're very difficult to handle. And we thought that Gelfand might be caught unaware of that. But especially as what happened in the game. You found it?
Yeah, I did.
Okay, so what happens after b3?
b3, d6, 7, e5, knight g6, h4.
Exactly. I mean, after e5, knight g6, this move h4. Well, this was Ganguly who came up with this. I mean, this is an insanely strong idea in the sense of that it's a positional pawn sacrifice. But if he sort of accepts it, he might just be positionally dead a long time, and white will win quite sort of in great attacking styles. I think h4 might even be suggested by the neural networks nowadays, but at that time it wasn't really the case. So we were incredibly excited for that, and especially when it happened, it was basically amazing. The problem was that I think on move 10, Gelfand played some move c4, right? Which was an extremely strong reaction. I think Gelfand thought for 40 minutes or something like this and played this. And, well, that seemed to make Vishy lose confidence to some extent. He was still slightly better, but basically he was coasting towards a draw. And I remember exactly that there was a lot of disappointment within the seconds. I mean, we thought, okay, finally we find this great idea. Finally he gets a good position, and it just ends up in a draw. But I think at least we managed to hide our emotions. Maybe Vishy understood it. Maybe he also felt disappointed himself. But we managed to be very professional and also look forward to now comes a playoff and such. But no, there, I mean, I wouldn't say we were celebrating, but we were incredibly excited for the first time for this there. We thought, okay, this is game 12, it's chess history, and we come up with a great concept, and Vishy gonna do like in Bonn and play an amazing game. But the problem was that perhaps contrary to Bonn, Gelfand defended brilliantly with his move c4, and the game ended up in a draw.
Amazing class by Gelfand.
Yeah, Gelfand. Again, I'm starting to. Well, I felt pity for him already in 2012, but I feel even more now that. Well, it would have been nice to have Gelfand on the list of world champions, but it's probably too late now, I'm afraid. But yeah, we'll see.
And there was a bit of play left in the position. Vishy was up a pawn, and there was a bit of play left in the final position where he agreed to a draw. How did you feel about that at that time, Peter?
I think in the end we thought it was not too much, but I think it was more disappointment in terms of that this was a missed opportunity in a way. But well, it was also a typical thing that if Vishy had lost some kind of advantage or some hidden possibility, my instincts would always be to hide it for him, not to tell him, to sort of not make him disappointed. While Kasimzdhanov was basically the opposite. He would he would think that no, he needs to know because he needs to stay more alert. He needs to be roughed up a little bit. I think was his term. So I think basically we started to describe each other as well, sort of not good cop, bad cop, but good second, bad second in terms of how we would give feedback. But we can get back to that about when we get to the playoff, which we are probably where we're heading now, I guess, right?
Yes, we are. So do you get a rest day before the playoff?
Yeah, there was a rest day before the playoffs, and that gives you time to prepare. Well, it means there's a rest day in terms of there's no play, but preparing for this playoff, of course, well, suddenly you have to prepare a lot of games in a short time, and that we did. And I think especially now Luke McShane came up with some, well, very, very nice concept that Vishy used in game one of the playoff, game two and one. But, well, here I think we did another good decision that we somehow thought, okay, enough of the Nimzo, let's at least try to ensure that it's us who surprises. And we started to go back to the Semislav. I mean, the Semislav must have been what Gelfand expected the most for the match, but we thought that at least now, 12 games have happened, he might have forgotten. And we also had quite some good prep, which means ask the obvious question, why didn't we use it before in the match? And I have absolutely no reasonable answer to that. No, it simply makes no sense. I mean, obviously in game 7, but later I cannot answer. It still puzzles me. Why didn't we think at some point that we'll maybe use this file we have lying there? We just we fell in love with something else and got stuck. But that's strange. But well, playoffs are a bit different in the way that well, suddenly the players are playing 4 games at the same day, right? So the seconds has to be available at the venue, but they cannot really all be there. There's limited space. I think we were allowed 3 people, which meant that, well, except for Vishy, obviously. We had a room where, well, there would be some food and maybe a chessboard, or we could bring our computers and we could be online. But there would be Vishy and Aruna and then 2 of the seconds. And, well, as you can imagine, it could give some problems. So to which seconds are going to go with Vishy, because, well, maybe some will see it as prestige. He will choose his favorites and so on and so forth, or who he thinks is best. But for us, it was extremely easy. I mean, well, Vishy wanted me and Kasim, but also I think Surya and Wotjasek would rather not go, as far as I remember. At least one of them said like that. So this was actually solved without any kind of dispute. Had it only been one, it would have been difficult for either me and Kasim to be discarded there. But for us, it worked easily, and it worked also well in the way that we had 2 people working. I mean, Ganguly and Wotjasek, but we will be in touch with them online. So actually, when I think of it, this is the first time I got to use remote seconds during a World Championship match. And basically, the format is that they play 4 games. And between each game, there's like 10 minutes to discuss things and such. But it's very difficult to give a lot of advice there. So while we try to keep our usual routines, which also needed to relax and such, so basically it was only a couple of minutes. So he would look at some files and such. And when I sort of, I think, spoke about a bit this good cop, bad cop thing, it was maybe after game 2, maybe I'm jumping ahead, but Vishy was winning. But then he completely made a horrible mistake, which allowed Gelfand to make a draw. But Gelfand didn't see it, and Vishy won anyway. And I was really telling Kasim, okay, please don't tell him that. And he said, no, he has to know it in a way. So I tried to talk for some time to sort of, block Kasim, but I didn't manage. But I think it turned out well in the end. But also, it sounds like me and Kasim is competing, but I think on the contrary, we understood very well that we had different roles. And I think even we had spoken about it the day before, so that we tried to complement each other with sort of different things. But the first game was a Semislav. Vishy surprised by playing his main opening in the way that he hadn't done before in the match. It worked well. If anything, I forgot if Vishy was slightly better, but it was a draw and such. But that was a good start. But what we really were looking forward to was game 2, because we thought we had some kind of great opening idea there. This was McShane, who has basically worked it out at night and sent us an email with it. And Well, this move order used in game 12, we dropped, but I think we went back to the move order with 5b3, if I remember correctly, right?
Yep.
Yeah, and I think then after b3, the game was knight e5, queen e7, and now the strange move d4. And this was not really the computer move, but we had incredible analysis there. Some lines, the king was ending up, white king was on c4 and such. And well, you can see that is somehow maybe irresponsible, but the main thing was that we were having a lot of fun. And we were having fun, but also the lines was at least somewhat relevant. But we came to this match, the playoff, in a very good mood. Perhaps also a confident move, but mainly in a good mood. We liked chess again. It was not all these draws we couldn't do anything about. Vishy was getting to play, and we thought we had some great stuff here. So we actually came there with a lot of confidence, I would say. And this game too, I mean, the opening idea was good. Vishy got some edge. At some point he misplayed it. Gelfand could have made a draw, but he didn't. And things started to look like they would finally end up well for Vishy. That's the first time he was ahead. But well, he stayed ahead. But the last two games was, to put it mild, very, very bumpy, if I recall correctly.
Yeah. So do you put added value on being able to spring a surprise like that, and the fact that it's an action playoff? I mean, obviously there's fewer games left.
Heavily. I think also when it becomes rapid, and we somehow assumed we will be more nervous for Gelfand than for Vishy, but I'm not really sure what I'm basing it on. But at least Vishy has been in more of this. Well, Vishy had a game 12 in Sofia, for instance. I mean, he's been in this kind of spots. It's not going to be easy for a person who's never been there before. I mean, well, you can train these kind of things, but you cannot simulate it well in any way. I mean, you will only know how you handle it when you get there. I would say, but I forgot your question. I'm sorry.
Well, yeah, I was just asking if it's better to spring the surprise in the action.
Yeah.
You answered it.
I think so. We tried to surprise heavily and such, but that backfired in the next game 3. Again, it becomes a bit technical, but when Vishy played this Semislav, it had one problem, that we do it via d4, d5, c4, c6, knight f3, knight f6 move order. And our preparation for the match was mainly that after e3, we wanted to play a6. But then after knight c3, e6, we would transpose back to this line that he played in the first 6 games. But that exactly we had discarded for the match to some extent. But now we brought it back by playing the Semislav. And that worked well via the move order Gelfand actually played in the match. But for this exact game, he played knight f3, knight f6, e3, which busted our move order. We knew this was a problem. Wojtaszek told me one day before, we started talking about what are we going to do? Are we going to tell Vishy or not? Because he might freak out, and we suddenly have to put a lot of energy to something that's not going to happen. I think we took this rare decision. Okay, stuff it. We're not going to tell Vishy. We just, if he doesn't think about it himself, we'll live with it. I mean, and it worked well. The first game was a draw. The second game he won. But now in game 3, when it really mattered, right? Gelfand played exactly this. Vishy was surprised. He took some kind of emotional decision and was basically positionally lost after 5 minutes. So that was obviously not so good. But Gelfand misplayed it a bit and didn't manage to win this overwhelming position he had, and it was a draw. So that was, that was a bit lucky. Well, what do you want me to say? Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, generally luck doesn't hurt in these situations.
No, exactly. It's much better to be lucky than be good. Vishy was good, but also at this stage, the ball started to bounce in the right direction, I would say. And then came game 4. He just needs to make a draw with white. In Bonn, for instance, when he needed a draw to clinch the match, well, we had excellent preparation doing that. Here we had like 10 minutes to sort of adjust to the situation. And well, we had thought a bit about it in the break between the games, but also, well, the problem is that we had excellent preparation in the night off, but it was very long, complicated lines. It sounded strange to do that when you only need a draw. So Vishy ended up playing bishop b5 check. Well, we had sort of told him that after knight d7, you should play castle knight f6 d4 or something like this. But he was not into details. We hadn't really told them to him. So he was actually slightly worse out of the opening. But he showed his class. He didn't panic. He didn't do anything wrong and just managed to draw an inferior position with white. He shouldn't have gotten into this situation, but he managed to defend it incredibly well. And I would say, after all, he won the World Championship match deservedly based on his last efforts. But it was a bumpy ride, to put it mild.
Yeah. Vishy wrote in the Mind Master, "I won the match because I won. I didn't do anything to deserve the win, and apparently he didn't do enough to not lose either."
Something like that, yeah. I mean, it could have been a different story, and of course, that would have been great for Gelfand, and he would be on your podcast now, right? But
Well,
it's not how it is. But it's also, I mean, I think I talked about how we celebrated and such after matches, right? And for instance, when he won against Topalov, it was clear that we were euphoric and such. Maybe it's going to sound tough or arrogant to Gelfand, what I'm saying now, but we barely celebrated. I think we were relieved and such. And had Gelfand won, of course, he would have been ecstatic, as he was supposed to be. Also, I think one thing that made an impression on me was that, this was happening in Moscow. And I'm just staying at home in my hotel. But during the playoff, I was also basically just sitting in some kind of... not bunker, but behind the stage there was some kind of uninspiring room with no windows, but basically we were allowed to sit there and work. So I didn't see any chess fans, but at one point I had to go to the toilet, and I passed by sort of the spectator areas. It was completely packed with spectators. But what struck me was also they were basically all rooting for Gelfand, as far as I could understand. Because, Gelfand has grown up as part of the sort of Soviet chess school and such, and had many friends and fans there and such. And, it almost felt like Sofia to some extent, except for, of course, that, Gelfand was incredibly kind towards us as a team and towards Vishy as a player and such. But, it was clear that we were basically, Gelfand was playing at home in Moscow and we were not. I'm just basically trying to maybe explain how popular Gelfand was and how many people were hoping for that. I think even someone was telling me while I walked to the toilet that he had this book that all world champions had signed, and that he was here on location just in case Gelfand should win, so he could sign the book. And I thought, that information I didn't necessarily need to get right at that time. But I think when the match was over, all of us went to some Indian restaurant and we had some dinner, but basically not too much happened. And I think we were more tired and relieved than we were happy that he had won. And that, of course, was perhaps also why we ended breaking up afterwards in a way. But the exception being Kasimzdhanov. I think Kasim decided, okay, his teammates might be dull. He went out partying, and I think the next morning he came to me. Okay, I'm sorry, I used all my money. Could you buy me a sandwich? So we went and had a sandwich together. That was very, very nice and such. But that's basically the last memories I have of Moscow, and it ended obviously incredibly well for us. But I think also the story explains why I think both me and Kasimzdhanov took other offers afterwards, and I think the team was basically used up in a way. I mean, don't get me wrong, we are incredibly good friends, all of us. There was nothing bad in it in a way. I think just that, it happened a lot of times. We spent, for 3 matches, we prepared 3 months. The matches also last a month each, so it basically becomes a year together, right, under this kind of stressful conditions. We know each other too well. We have told each other the same stories and such. And it seemed time that, now was enough, and then suddenly people went in different directions, at least some of us.
Okay, yeah, and for listeners not familiar, of course, Peter has been working with Magnus, as we alluded to, although sat out the 2013 World Championship, and Kasimzdhanov worked with Fabiano for...
even kayaking before that, I think, as well, right?
Okay, yeah. And a couple more questions, Peter. So you mentioned sort of being, behind enemy lines in Moscow. Now, obviously, Gelfand himself is a total class act, and you have nothing to worry about in that regard. But does anyone on the team worry about some sort of subterfuge, food poisoning when you're in Moscow, stuff like that?
No, not at all. I think with Gelfand, sometimes we talked about security. I think here Vishy said, okay, I know Gelfand for basically my whole career, it makes no sense to debate such things. But
And you're not worried about like independent actors, hardcore chess
no,
fans?
I mean, no, I mean, I think I have seen this Netflix series, what is it called? The Last Dance, right? And there Michael Jordan talks about that he got food poisons from independent actors, and that of course can happen. No, I don't think we thought much about that, but well, also we would be eating at random restaurants and such, but no, I think basically if people wanted to get to us like that, they would manage, but such didn't worry us. I mean, I think what chess players really cares about is that they are afraid that let's say that their internet security will be breached, so that the opponents can get access to their files. But of course, we take some precautions with food and such. But also, you should probably see teams as being, well, I'm in the part responsible for the chess work and such. But Vishy was also there with his wife Aruna, obviously, and she will be the one caring maybe about his psychological well-being, about food and things like that. So I simply don't know much about that, but we would generally go out eating together. But I think no, this was not a worry. Let's put it like that.
Okay. And another question I've wondered about now, obviously the primary team, the four grandmasters who were there in Moscow, are compensated for your extremely hard work. People who've come up in the story like Grandmaster Mickey Adams and Luke McShane, who sort of do some one-off consulting and help with opening lines, are they generally compensated in these situations, Peter?
I think it depends. I think some of them has been, others to a lesser extent, but also I don't know is the honest answer, actually. I mean, I think generally salary is not something you discuss openly, I would guess. So I don't know. I think maybe also it's a right strategy to do it like that, or at least that's how it has been done in the teams I've been to. It's well, it's a tricky thing to start talking about, but actually in the times of Team Vishy, I mean, I might have an idea. Some of them have mentioned it for one or two matches, but I cannot just tell you sort of, well, I wouldn't, but even, if I wanted to, I would not be able to tell you this guy got that amount of money and so on and so forth.
No, I'm not curious about amounts, more about
of that, but I don't know. I think also maybe at some point, actually during this match, someone was trying to tell me that they had an idea against the Grunfeld, but I would like to be paid for it and such. And
right.
I didn't really have a budget for that. Well, there is a story in one of the Magnus matches, but I think if our agreement is 10 years, you will have to wait 4 more years before I tell you. So I hope I remember at that time.
Okay, and I'll gladly wait. And of course, the reports of Kasparov offering to help Gelfand. I guess it was tied into our old friend a FIDE election. What was your mindset surrounding that during the match?
I don't think it mattered so much to us in that extent. I mean, I think we heard the rumors, and I forgot if it was public before that Gelfand said no. But I think Gelfand's argument was that you want people who wants to help you positively, not someone who basically wants to hurt the opponent in a way. I mean, well, at that point, it was Kasparov who helped us in 8 and 10, and he was very useful in many ways. But of course, also with each year passing, he will be less and less out of touch in a way. So I don't think it affected us too much to that extent. But I mean, every kind of rumors, of course, adds some kind of stress in these situations. But I mean, we had enough problems already. So this was not something that made us crack, especially, at least I can say.
Okay. And Peter, generally, I think what is probably my final question. You mentioned early in our interview, you look back at this match with some warmth and some nostalgia, despite a lot of the descriptions being of suffering. So when you do look back at it, like what brings you joy? What brings you warmth from the match?
Well, it's also, you talk about it like suffering, but there was also a lot of great times. I think that, for instance, this 3 months, I said the first and the last month was actually not too bad and such. But as I said, it's a team of people that you spent basically 1 year together with. So I think mainly you miss them as good friends in a way. And whenever there's a tournament, I really enjoy going for a walk with Kasimzdhanov or having a beer with Ganguly in airports and stuff like this. And we basically share good memories. And it's clear that it's people that you will be friends with for life, despite that you talk very little with them in a way because you share some things. But still, having said that, I mean, the warm memories for me, strangely, is well, it's my job, so maybe it's not that strange, but it goes around the creative phase of the last week. I mean, there suddenly we managed to actually turn things around, and well, that became a lesson for me that this pre-match work is maybe difficult and maybe not so necessary, while having people who is able to be creative when it really matters is very important. And well, you can argue that perhaps this is how it's built in Team Magnus at the moment, right? That we have less intensity pre-match, but then we have a belief in that we bring together guys we think can produce stuff during the match and such. But well, when you talk about the warmth, it's mainly connected to the people. I mean, well, Vishy, Radek, Surya, Kasim, Arona, and some of the others, Hans Walter Smith, Erik van Ram, for instance. I mean, well, there's a lot of personal memories with them, but when it comes to chess, it's basically down to that the last week or the last 5 days.
Makes sense. Well,
I'm
Peter,
afraid so. Yeah.
we appreciate you sharing these memories with us. Again, it's amazing to hear them as a chess fan.
You're very welcome, and let's hope that we can talk again in a couple of years when it's the 10-year anniversary of that's going to be Sochi, right? You'll have to get another one for the Chennai match, I'm afraid.
Okay, well, I'll look forward to it 2 years from now. It sounds good to me. Thanks so much, Peter.
You're welcome.
Thanks to everyone who helps make Perpetual Chess possible. Big shout out to my producer, Matthew Passy. I'd also like to thank the Blue Wire Podcast Network, with whom we are proud to be affiliated. Be sure to follow us on social media, Beneficial1 on Twitter, at Perpetual Chess on Instagram, or you can join the Perpetual Chess Facebook group. You can email me, ben@perpetualchesspod.com. And of course, last but not least, I'd like to give major thanks to the Perpetual Chess Patreon and PayPal supporters. Those who choose to join that community based on their level of support can do things like submit questions for guests of the show, have access to live Zoom Q&A lectures with grandmasters who often have appeared on the show, going over chess games, answering questions, stuff like that. And you can even get access to ad-free Perpetual Chess if that's your preference. But most of all, thanks to everyone for listening, and we will catch you all on the next episode.